Good morning, it's Gary Simmons. I'm on the wrong slide to begin with, so let's see if we can back this thing up one slide. There we go. Disease does not have to begin in the gut, contrary to the popular belief that disease begins in the gut, which is actually true 80-90% of the time, for sure, and I'll tell you why. But the 5 or 10 or 15% of the times that disease comes into our body, not through our mouths and what we're eating and what we're putting into our body, it could be other ways things come into our body. For example, a mosquito bite can bring dengue fever or malaria, and a tick bite, a deer tick, can bring us Lyme disease, which can be a very excruciating and painful situation to deal with. Well, my name is Gary Simmons. I am the baby boomer health coach. I'm a baby boomer myself. I'm in my mid-60s. And I was born in Washington, D.C. in the early 50s. And I've had a pretty full life of various trades and callings and professions that I've engaged in. 3 decades of my life was spent in missions work in Europe, in the Indian subcontinent, and in China. So I taught for 3 years in China. I was at least 10 years in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and several years in Europe. So I have a pretty broad set of experiences to draw from, and hopefully I can illuminate and give you some experiential evidence of things that I've learned over the years in regards to health and coaching. So today we're going to talk about digestive issues and how to overcome. I would say for people who have GI tract issues, 80-85%, I really like percentages, as you can tell, although I don't want to be pinned down, but a large majority of stomach issues are self-inflicted and caused by our habits. So there, I said it. Lifestyle is really, really important. But let's just start with the basics. Gas, bloating, distension, being overly full after a meal, belching, flatulence, reflux. None of this is fun. It can be anywhere from painful to embarrassing. It can be discomforting to actually leading to disease. And we counteract this by what we call eating hygiene or eating clean. Some of our clients do indeed have major dysfunction in the GI tract, which requires in-depth intervention. It requires, in some cases, testing. More testing than you would normally get in a doctor's office, and there's a good reason for that. Doctors are under the gun from the insurance companies to see X number of patients a day, by which they have to divide their 8-hour workday into time slots. And if you get a 15-minute appointment, that's the maximum you can spend with your doctor, even though you've waited in the waiting room for 30 to 45 minutes. That's the way it is. Sometimes you might get a half-an-hour appointment for something that's more involved or difficult. If you see a specialist, you may be able to spend up to an hour with a specialist, finding out about your health history and putting the pieces together to try to figure out a diagnosis. However, in this model of Western medicine, basically the primary function of medicine is, and what Western medicine is really good at, is intervention and triage. In other words, saving lives. That's what Western medicine excels at. If I'm in a car accident, I have a broken bone, yes, I want that doctor to have an understanding of my physiology and be able to reset the bone and get me out of pain immediately, and those type of things. However, when it comes to chronic illness, or the 4 big major chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, insulin resistance being part of that, and metabolic function, the systems and the syndromes that we have in our metabolism, being able to methylate and break down chemicals and do all the processing that the body needs to do, doctors do not have time to investigate to that depth. Whereas a functional medicine health coach will take the time. That's what we do as a means of helping people to get, first of all, rapid relief, and secondly, we want to get them well and that they can stay well and they don't repeat and fall back into some sort of revisionism where they do well for 3 months while they're being coached, and then they fall back into poor habits that defeat what they're trying to do. So we are sharing here some of the most helpful tips, and I hope that you can use these to get rid of your own frustrations. And I think, like I said, 80% of you can get some relief from the principles that we share here. And do not be fooled, do not be misled that these ideas are going to be extremely simple, that a 2-year-old will be able to understand, but they are powerful principles upon which you build successful habits. So the first principle is you and I, all of us, need to slow down. Yes, we know it's easier said than done at times. Let's say, for example, you were raised in a large family. You had 6 siblings, and at sitting down at the family dinner, you couldn't get seconds unless you wolfed down your first, or maybe there'd be no dessert left if you were a slow eater. You practically inhaled what was on your plate. I know you know what I'm talking about. And in today's society, what do? We have drive-thrus at the restaurants. We actually don't even get out of our car. We get our meal in a paper bag, and we go with sandwich in hand, driving back to the next appointment or back to the office. And this is no way to digest your food. You have to slow down. Digestion takes time, and digestive secretions such as stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes need time to fully secrete. Once we start the process of digestion, we can't hurry it up. If we try to hurry it up, we stress out. It'll take even longer to digest. It might even take 2 or 3 days to digest a lunch that you had if you're under stress. And that causes all sorts of problems with constipation or diarrhea. And basically we're living in a state of fight or flight. We're very competitive at work and in our society. If you wolf down your meal in a hurry, a very full stomach has trouble mixing acid and enzymes well with your food. All on its own, this dynamic creates indigestion as a basis. Like, that is 100% true. If you had a frying pan full of stir fry and you try to blend it into the size of a coffee cup, so your stomach is actually not very large. And a lot of people don't even know where their stomach is. It's kind of sad to say, but your stomach resides next door to your liver on the left side under your rib cage, and it's not very big. Below that, towards your navel and towards the waist, that's your intestines. So when you're walking around with too much weight in your, we say it's belly fat, but in fact, it's not even belly fat if you're considering that your belly is your stomach. I don't know if those 2 words are exactly synonyms, but suffice it to say, the stomach is not very large. So when you eat fast, you tend to overeat, and the spillover is what you belch and what you burp and what you fart. So that's the sad story of that. It takes about 20 minutes for your gut to signal your brain that you're full and reduce your sense of hunger. That's the courtesy of a hormone called CCK. Gulp down your food in 10 minutes, you're much more likely to overeat, end up feeling bloated 20 minutes later, and guess what? That is going to cause a syndrome where you're going to want to take a nap because you're trying to digest food that's been residing in your stomach that's not moving anywhere. So when you get to the point that you sit back down at your desk, you're suddenly seeing, you're feeling your eyes drooping. If you need help getting started, here's the way to eat. You sit down at a table. Get in the habit of putting your knife and fork down when you've taken a bite, and sit back in your chair and chew. You could even spice up the meal by having a little conversation once you've swallowed the food that's in your mouth. After you've swallowed, take at least one full cleansing breath before you pick up your utensils to enjoy another bite. So let me make this point that there are taste buds in your mouth, on your tongue, that help you to derive sensory information. So that sandwich, the taco, or whatever it is, the salad that you're eating, the olive oil and the balsamic vinegar and the combination of flavors that creates with your greens, those things are meant to be observed, enjoyed, and partaken of in a way, maybe gratitude, maybe thankfulness, maybe a prayer for those who don't have much to eat this day. Those kind of thoughts can help you slow down and really savor the flavor. The next thing, besides after you've learned to slow down a bit, chewing. Chew your food. Believe it or not, on average, we Americans chew a bite of food about 6 times maximum before we swallow. Chewing is the only part of the digestive process that is voluntary. In other words, we get to control that. But how often do we take a bite, chew it twice, and swallow that piece of meat or the tomato or the cheese or the bread? We swallow that almost whole. The less we chew our food, the harder our GI tract has to work. This creates post-meal fatigue, as we talked about earlier. Ideally, we chew our food until it's almost liquid before swallowing. This can reduce gas and increase post-meal energy. In other words, if you've allowed the saliva in your mouth and all the digestive enzymes that are in your mouth to do their job of beginning the breakdown of the food, and you've emulsified it more or less, and you swallow, then your stomach doesn't have so much work to do in order to continue the process and mix in the enzymes and the stomach acids in order to break down the food further. When we swallow chunks of food, tiny, almost liquefied bits, it's harder for digestive enzymes in to do their job. So the two choices are big chunks of food or liquefied bits. So what I do for one of my meals per day, I have a protein smoothie mixed with a lot of fiber and vegetables and greens and protein powder, usually almond milk with that, and and that I make it a little bit on the thick side so I can really drink it very slowly and allow my stomach to receive the food in a liquefied form where the digestion is not so hard. If I do this for my lunch, it makes it much easier to keep working in the afternoon. When carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates, hang around too long, the bacteria in our guts go to work and feast heartily and create a gas buildup as a metabolic byproduct. And that's flatulence. And here's the result: distension, bloating, flatulence. If you chew your food thoroughly, it's much easier to slow down. So getting started. If you have a hard time chewing more than 5 or 6 times, then start counting your chews. Count every bite. Chew it at least 20 or 30 times. The exception, of course, is soup and other delicate foods. But again, ideally we chew food until it's liquid. If you feel a strong impetus to swallow beforehand, just move the food to the side of your mouth, swallow saliva, and keep chewing. Think of what you do automatically when you're chewing gum. Prioritize eating. Many people feel that eating is somehow a waste of time unless it's done while multitasking. How many times are you eating your sandwich sitting at your desk looking at your computer screen? A fascinating choice when you consider that eating is the one thing we do which literally creates our future body. So it's kind of important, those meal times. We get in the habit of eating on the go. For example, in the car, rushing to a meeting, while walking to another building, or standing up at a counter preparing kids' food. All of these are recipes for indigestion. A high-impact way to live on purpose is to treat a meal as a special, singular event that you focus on what you're eating and you focus on the people you're eating with and enjoy the company. Make it an enjoyable process. If you sit down while you eat, in a way, when we eat in a way that doesn't allow our nervous system to fully relax and move into the parasympathetic mode, we'll talk about that in a minute, we literally put out less digestive fluids. We have to enter into a space where what we call rest and digest. That's the parasympathetic mode of the way we treat our environment. Fight or flight is the sympathetic part of the nervous system that actually sends adrenaline to the extremities and produces more and more cortisol. If you're in fight or flight, you're in a real competitive race against your boss, against colleagues, against time. You cannot rest and digest. You can't do both. It's like a switch. One is on and the other is off. So if you want to enter into rest and digest, the parasympathetic mode, maybe this is why people stop and actually say a prayer before their meal. They're actually switching gears for being in that competitive modality and moving into a parasympathetic modality. And this is why people can become nauseous in stressful situations. So communicate to your body with your actions that it's safe to relax. Let down your guard, focus on digestion and restoring our reserves. So a lot of this is just built into the system. It's just the way it is with our autonomic nervous system. Breathe. The body needs oxygen to properly digest. Help calm your body and support digestion by taking a few slow, calming breaths when you sit down to a meal before you start eating. Dr. Mark Hyman suggests that you take 5 deep, long, cleansing breaths before you start eating, which is a pretty good habit to get into. Relax and savor. Try to learn to just be in the moment with your food. Colors, textures, aromas, flavors. Most of us are mentally elsewhere. We should not be trading stock while we're having lunch. We should not be trying to read and answer email while we're having lunch. We should not be on the phone while we're having lunch. Even watching TV, the news, it can be very stressful. The brain tends to miss out on the entertainment, and we're much more likely to overeat. So basically, we're distracting ourselves from the meal We don't realize that we're actually eating. And remember that 20-minute gap between your gut telling your brain that you're full? So always stop eating before you're full. Does that make sense? Distraction increases food intake. Postpone stressful discussions, replying to tense emails, or paying bills until later. If you need help to get started, plan your meals. For most people, it helps to put them literally in your daily appointment and commitment calendar. For many people, putting them into your calendar makes sense. This ensures the time is truly set aside to care for yourself via mindful eating. Also, be careful not to consume large amounts of water during a meal, because then you're diluting the acidity of your stomach and you're slowing down digestion. Depending on your sensitivity, this can cause an early sense of fullness and belching, and long-term can cause malnutrition. And this type of malnutrition causes you to be low on some very important vitamins and minerals, mainly vitamin D, B12, magnesium, or iron. If it's near mealtime and you feel thirsty, make a point of drinking a large glass of water right away. Then allow your body to absorb it while you're in transit to your meal or while you prepare it, ideally 20 minutes before eating. This allows the water to clear your stomach before its digestive duty begins. Ideally, get in the habit of carrying a water glass or a bottle around with you throughout the day and sip on it regularly. This is extremely important. I have personal experience with being dehydrated, and it can lead to very serious conditions. These are pretty simple solutions. Don't underestimate how powerful they can be. We've seen many clients dramatically change their digestion, energy, and nutrition with these simple steps. Given our stress-crazed, achievement-obsessed, go-go-go society, however, it can be hard to implement these principles consistently, but you can do it. They're actually so simple, do not gloss over them. A 2-year-old can learn these. Like anything else, it just has to be your priority. We recommend printing out a copy of this article. There's a PDF below that has just the words without all the pictures. Keeping it in your kitchen, on your dining table. Repetition and persistence, your awareness creates the big change and the long-term relief. I'm going to just say a couple of words about diet in terms of rules for staying in a proper BMI weight class where you're not overweight and you're not suffering obesity, which is pretty common. I think 30% of the country is now officially obese, and maybe another 40% of people are in the overweight class. It's actually, as you grow older, it's more and more difficult to stay in your what would be your current, what would be in your ideal BMI range, your body mass index range. But here's the key. We eat too much. We overeat, and we eat too many times a day. I know there are certain protocols where you eat several times a day, up to 6 times a day, where you eat really small meals. This is not a good idea if you have any kind of propensity or you have a predisposition towards diabetes. You don't want the insulin firing off every 2 hours. That's not a good idea. And along with that, calorie restriction. Not speaking of the extreme of where a person can become anorexic in calorie restriction, but restricting calories to your basal metabolic rate. We'll talk about that more later, but basically there's a certain number of calories you need every day just to perform daily bodily functions. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but if you take your weight just before you go to bed and then you weigh yourself in the morning, you're generally going to be 2 pounds lighter in the morning because of all the work your body's doing while you're sleeping, all the regeneration, all the recuperation. So we'll talk more about diet and losing weight later on in another class, but I just want to give you a little hint, a little taste of how easy optimal health can be. Optimal health is not complicated. It's pretty simple, just as this class shows. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry it went so long. It's 25 minutes right now, so I will cut it off here and tell you to look forward to the next class. Thank you.